Okay, we're going to learn the Sicha. I'm bringing it up. We're learning the Sicha of Vayechi, 1967. Okay, here we go. Hold on. Okay. So it says like this: Poschim b'dvar malchus. And we're going to start with the word of the king. Dvar malchus HaKadosh Baruch Hu, i.e. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hashem. Malchus shel olam, the king of the world. And what is the word of the king? Is the Torah. Because Torah was given in this space, in time and space, is Harimuvin is understood. If one wants to start talking about the Torah, one should start with the Parsha of the week. And he says, that we're reading in time. So the Rebbe says that Dvar Malchus is the word of the king. What is the word of the king? The word of the king is the word on the Parsha, which is connected to the time. Although we can speak about any part of the Torah, but because the time now is for a certain Parsha, we're going to talk about this idea. When we're talking about the Parsha itself, there's many verses in the Parsha. And every verse has many letters. Best is, hello Rav Shimon, we're just starting 397. And Barbara, we're just, it's to start with the beginning of the Parsha. The first verse of the Parsha, Pasuk Rishon Gufa, and the first verse itself, that has many words. The first letter of the first word in the opening of the Parsha. The Rebbe is obviously getting to something. As it says, we said in other places, the first word of the Parsha is the insight and gives us understanding to all the parts of the Parsha. Because that's the name that we call the Parsha. So we analyze the first word, and from that we understand the energy of the Parsha and the message of the Parsha. And not only that, we pay attention to the first letter of the word, of the opening word of the Parsha. What does it mean to start with the word of the king? Start how the king started. And the king started, meaning to say, how did Hashem start this Parsha? Obviously, we're talking about Vayechi, we're talking about the Vav. Because obviously, there was analyzing what's the difference between Vayechi and he lived. It should say Yechi Yakov. Va'ad psicha to the opening of the Parsha. So the Rebbe continues. Kivon hey Ariel, Kivon shetor shebiksav v'tor shebal peh boim b'chad machta v'kemavur begaras hakodesh. They come from one place, the written in oral Torah, as is brought down in the Geras HaKodesh of the Alter Rebbe Shiratzin Elin Baruch Hu, that the desire of Hashem, the want of Hashem, Hamluvish b'taryag mitzvahs sheb'tor shebiksav, that is enclosed in the 613 mitzvahs that are in the Torah Shebeksav, in the written Torah. They're only revealed. How do you do a mitzvah? Who teaches us how to do the mitzvah is the oral Torah. As we see clearly, just to understand what the Torah, the written Torah, is talking about, we need the oral Torah to explain us. We have the Medrash, the Gemara, the Halacha, meaning what you should be doing, the positive commandments, and also to avoid misinterpreting the Torah. When we look in the Gemara or we look in the commentaries that teach us how we're supposed to understand the Chumash, we know that other translations that are not according to that may not be true. So the Torah Shebal Peh tells us what not to look into the verses. Don't think the verse means X, Y, and Z, but it means something else. So Hare, moving from this is understood. When we start with the Parsha, and we start with the word of the king, meaning the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is how the Torah opens up this week's Parsha. How we understand the beginning of the Parsha comes together, not just with the written Torah, but also how the oral Torah, the Torah Shebal Peh, explains the written Torah. How, that means when we look at the opening of a Parsha in the written Torah, we have to look into the oral Torah to understand what is the Torah trying to tell us. Okay, this is the Rebbe saying an opening statement. What are we talking about? The Rebbe says, Beis, Hascholas Parshi. How does this week's parsha start? Vayechi Yakov be'eretz Mitzrayim Sheva Esri Shana. And Yakov lived in Egypt 17 years. V'tzarach lahavin, so we have to analyze. Ma'adua hutzrach hakasav loimer vayechi Yakov be'eretz Mitzrayim Sheva Esri Shana. Why is the Torah telling us this, that Yaakov lived in Egypt 17 years? We already have a verse before that tells us, when Yaakov comes down to Mitzrayim, Omar, he says, Lepari, when Pari asks him, how old are you? When Pari asks Yaakov, how many years, how old are you? And he says, he responded to Pari, I'm 130 years old. If that's the case, when the Torah continues to tell us how old Yaakov is when he dies, and he's 147 years old, anyone who knows a little bit of math knows that he was 17 years in Egypt. When the Torah tells us, when the Torah tells us that Yaakov was 7 years and 40 years and 100 years, i.e. 147 years old, so we know that he's 17 years in Egypt. As I move in, so then we know we don't need the Torah to tell us the math. Every word in Torah is calculated. Why does the Torah have to tell us that he's 17 years in Egypt? So then we look into the oral Torah. We know the story of the Alter Rebbe, V'nechtoi, and his grandson Hatzamach Tzedek, the Tzemach Tzedek. Kefish Shekvar Nitvas, the story has been printed already. When the Tzemach Tzedek was a young boy, he's a grandson of he's later to become the third Rebbe of Chabad, and he's the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad. So when he was learning as a youth, the verse, Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim sheva asrei shana. So when the Torah says that Yaakov lived in Egypt 17 years, Tirgim Lai Mairai, his teacher translated, Alpi Balaturim, based on the commentary, the Balaturim, which is the Torah, which is on the Torah. One of the commentaries also with a mystical twist. She Yaakov Avinu Chai es Yud Zayin Mifchar Shnoisav be'eretz Mitzrayim. The Baal Turim tells us that the best years, the best years, the chosen years of his life, he lived in Egypt. So Kivan, that's what the teacher tells the Tzemach Tzedek as a boy. So he says, and because these 17 years were the best years of his life, that's why we count him as their own unit of time, because he had a hard life. So when he has good years, the Torah puts together, these are the 17 good years of Yaakov's life. And he was able to elevate and affect the others' years. When you have good years, it kind of gives meaning to the difficult years. So what happened? So the Tzemach Tzedek learned that the Baal Turim explained that why do we count 17 years? Because these were the best 17 years of his life. So the Torah tells us that these are Yaakov's best years. Yosef is there, etc. So the story continues. Tzemach Tzedek was an orphan. His mother passed away when he was a child. So when he comes home to his grandfather, and he asked his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, how is it possible? Yaakov Avinu, the great Yaakov, our father, the chosen of the fathers, that where are his best years? Yud Zayin Shana, Shigar Be'eretz Mitzrayim Erves Aretz. His best years are in Egypt. And Egypt is known as the lowest place of the world. I'm not talking about low in space. It's Erva. Erva it was a place full of tumah, full of impurities. How could Yaakov's favorite years be in a place of impurity? Kolaimer, he says like this. What's the question? Hey, MS, I understand. Yes, physically, these were his best years. He didn't have any tsaras. He didn't have all the things that he suffered throughout his life kind of went away. So it makes sense. Yaakov lived a life of tsaris, of trials. He was running away from Esav. He had problems with Dinah. He had problems with Yosef, being kidnapped. They were killed in his mind. Is tsaris love and tsaris Esav, etc. He had the tsaris of love and the tsaris of Esav. Okay, so I understand. Now things calm down. He finally had menucha. He finally had tranquility in his life, the last 17 years of his life. Visparnas ade Yosef, he didn't have to worry about money. He was taking care of everything from Yosef. Yosef fed everyone. He took care of everyone. That you could say only about a person. A person who defines success, happiness, tranquility about bodily things, material things. That would make sense that the 17 years that things were calm is the best years of his life. But we're talking about Yakov here. When we're talking about Yaakov Avinu, his the main thing by him is his soul, his spirituality. First comes his soul, then comes his body. More than that. By Yaakov, his soul takes over his body to elevate his body. Not that his soul and his body are separate. The bodily needs on its own has no place. The neshama is what dictates what's a life of Yaakov, what's a chayis of Yaakov, a vitality of Yaakov. Vim came, so the Tzemach Tzedek asks, how could we say, what are his best years? Not in Eretz Yisrael, not in Chevron, not in next to his father, next to his learning with his grandfather. How you Eretz Mitzrayim, it was in Egypt, in the worst place in the world, the lowest place spiritually in the world. The Rebbe says, imagine, before Yaakov was in Mitzrayim, Yaakov Eretz Yisrael lived in the Holy Land. Eretz HaKodesh, the Holy Land. Where's this? We know he had special angels in Eretz Yisrael. Where's this easier for the soul, lifol, to be effective? Kol Inyan Kedushin, holy things, shalah, that it has to engage in. Eretz Yisrael, Yesem Eretz Mitzrayim. Surely his soul had a more spiritual effect and an ability to perform than in Eretz Mitzrayim, in Eretz Yisrael. Look, Avram went to Egypt. He left right away. He couldn't stay there long. It was a low place. And we know that when Yaakov lived in Eretz Yisrael, we know there were other times before the whole story of Esav. He wasn't 10 years old when he got into a fight with his brother. He was in his late 60s or 70s, right, when he got into a struggle with Esav. So he sat his early years calm, b'lamed Torah, and he learned Torah b'beis hamedrash al Shem ve'Ever, in the yeshiva of Shem and Ever. Surely the years in yeshiva that he learned before his turmoil started, where that should have been his best years. How could the Baal Turim say that what were the best years of Yaakov? The 17 years he lived in Egypt. So the Rebbe continues. So that's the question that the Tzemach Tzedek, a young boy later to become a Rebbe, asks his grandfather, Alter Rebbe. What does the Alter Rebbe answer him? So here the Alter Rebbe responds to him. It says like this, that in last week's parsha we learned that before Yaakov went down to Mitzrayim, it says, Ves Yehuda shalach lefanav. He sends Yehuda ahead of him, El Yosef to Yosef, Lahiris lefanav Goshna, to set up Goshen. Goshen is the area that they lived in Mitzrayim. So the Medrash says, and move Rashi, and Rashi quotes this Medrash, meaning to say that this is, if Rashi quotes it, it's Pshuti Shemikra, it's the simple understanding of the verse. The Haskanle based Talmud. Why would he send Yehuda ahead? Anything else Yosef took care of. But he wanted Yehuda to set up a yeshiva, based Talmud, a place of study. Shetiya Sham Torah, that there should be a place of Torah for the tribes and their children to sit and learn Torah. Vishayu Hashvatim Hugim Torah. There should be a yeshiva all set up, ready with the Sforim, the benches and the tables and the space, so that the Shvatim, the tribes, and their children can come sit and learn Torah. Lahiris Lefan of Goshna. What does it mean, Lahiris Lefan of Goshen, to set up ahead of him in Goshen? Shekshalayim Torah. Because when we study Torah, Azay Miskarvim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the word Goshna is from the word Hagosha, to get closer. How do we get closer? Through studying Torah. And then you become alive. Means that what the Alter Rebbe answered him was that because there was a yeshiva and there was a place to learn in Mitzrayim, so now that's a Vayechi, there's something to live for. Let's see what the Rebbe is going to continue to analyze this story. This is the Rebbe said, my opening statement that includes in it the oral Torah, the written Torah, the verse Vayechi Yakov, and the explanation of the Baal Turim and the story of the Alter Rebbe. And now the Rebbe continues. What is the lesson for us? Like everything in Torah, the Torah doesn't just tell us a story. Yaakov's best years were in Egypt because he opened up a yeshiva. It's something that happened in the past. That has nothing to do with the present. And this has to be a lesson to us in all times, in all places. Specifically, it's not just a happening that happened with anyone. It's a happening that happened to our fathers. We only have three fathers. When it comes to the fathers themselves, Yaakov is the chosen of all the fathers. So if something happens to him, something that happens, a maisa is happening to our fathers, is a sign to our children how we have to live our life. Hayra, it's a lesson, v'slilas derech, and paving of the path. B'negel and hagas kol echem Yisrael, how every Jew has to deal in their situations. And especially based on the teaching of the Alter Rebbe. It's not just a story that happened in the Torah at some point. We're reading about it now that has to be a lesson for now. Zman, this is the time that we're living in it. The Hainu in Parsha Shavu, we have to live with the Parsha. So this is a lesson for us now on Asara B'Tevis, 5,785. V'kivan shekain, if that's the case, we must take a lesson for our own lives for how the Torah portion starts this week. And what is the lesson we have to take? The Rebbe says, it's not enough. A Jew studies Torah, and elevates themselves in their own life in God-fearing. When you're in a calm place, right? Before yeshiva, when you're in yeshiva, you could learn. So there to study Torah and to have Yir Shemaim, fear of God, that's not enough. That a soul should come down. We've learned this idea many times. For a soul to come down to this world, to go into a body so the body could sit in a yeshiva and eat food from the yeshiva and have a bed taking care of them from the yeshiva and study Torah, that's not why a person was born. For that, the soul could have stayed in heaven and also studied Torah in heaven's yeshiva. For the very fact that the world comes down to this world, the soul comes down to this world. The Bira Mikdat, a low place. This is a great descent for the soul. And only because the soul goes down does it have the ability to have a true elevation. Even greater. And it would never be able to achieve this elevation had the soul not gone down to this world. And we can't say we're talking about the experience of a yeshiva before the person goes into the challenges of life. Is how Removins understood. Just like the soul has to go down to the world, you have to go to Mitzrayim. You have to go into a place of challenge. Mitzrayim is Meitzar. And there, to be a Jew, that's the struggle. That's the elevation the soul gets. But for the soul to come into the body and to go into yeshiva and stay in yeshiva and go back, that's not the purpose of creation. Erva Sa'aretz, you do have to go to the lowest place in the earth. Is there the soul is going to find its true elevation and completeness. This is what it means. If you want to know what Yakov counts as his best years, that doesn't just, it's not just a conclusion of his life, but an elevation of his whole life, meaning to say it elevates all his other years. Specifically is in Egypt. Not that it happened to be in Egypt, he had his best years. It's because it's in Egypt. Only there does the soul have the ability to have its elevation. In Egypt, and nevertheless, to open up a yeshiva and to study and to stay with Yosef and from, that's the elevation that the soul that Yakov has. And this happens. That we know. Although we may be in Egypt, Erva could be the lowest place of the world. And again, lowest spiritually. Initially, the first thing we do is set up in this place a yeshiva. The yeshiva doesn't have to be specifically yeshiva, but a place of Jewish structure. That there's going to be guidance of how a Jew is supposed to be. Not just to study, but a way to actually guide us in our studies. Torah is not just about study. It's also an idea of teaching us how to live actually. Because the main idea of study is to bring us that we should behave in a certain way. That means notwithstanding. Now the Rebbe is talking in 1967 to the Jews living in the United States, in a great country. The Rebbe says, Eretz Ashira, a rich country that provides funding and sponsors many other countries to be able to elevate their standard of living. So a person may think, don't just get sucked in to the personal physical benefits. To know the idea is to make over there a place of study, a place of hayra, of guidance of how one should elevate their time and space in this world. Even though yes, you may be living in Egypt, it's a rich country, it's the superpower. And you're dealing with you're part of the story. You're involved in Egypt things, not in a negative way. What's your focus? You're saturated with a yeshiva, with Torah, with godliness. And then when you have that balance, that interaction between both. Hold on a second. Yeah, let's get the mutes on. So when we have that intertwined between the Torah, living a Torah life, a Jewish life, and living even in a superpower, place that you could accomplish great things also materially. But then you have the proper balance. So he says, that we don't have to fall under the rules of Egypt, al-adrab, on the contrary. So, on the contrary, you set the laws, you elevate the laws of Egypt. Yosef set the rules. He was the ruler of the whole of Egypt. Everyone had to listen to what Yosef had to say. The Rebbe says this attitude has to be for us also how where we are living currently. We live in a great country that provides for all other countries. So it's provided for all other countries in funding and in technology, etc. All other countries need to come on to the United States because of their wealth in knowledge and actual funding. That we have to know. Don't get lost only in the material ideas of the world. Set up a yeshiva that gives over guidance. What's a Jew's job? Is lumot Torah, is to study Torah. Not just the studying, it actualizes in behavior. How are we supposed to act in worldly things? And where do we have the power to have this strength to be accomplishing in other countries and have this this balance in Torah and Hayra? So we get this from our fathers. As we said, the happenings of the fathers, Siman Labanim, is a sign of how the children should be. Our fathers are our educators. They educate us to say how are we supposed to approach when we go into a country like this, where we have an opportunity to both be influential. We have to make sure that our influence is also according to the laws and the ways of Torah. The job of a father is to educate his sons. So too, the Jewish people, we take our education from our fathers, especially Yakov, the Bachar Shabbat, the chosen of the fathers. Then you're really alive. That's why it says Vechi Yakov. How do you cleave to Hashem, your Lord? Is to be alive is through Torah. When a person behaves according to the ways of Torah, Shenikras Torah's Chayim, it's called the Torah of life. And the commandments. We live with Torah. We become alive with the living God. Okay, the pasuk the Rebbe continues in the Farbrengen. That's the opening talk of the Rebbe. The Rebbe says, aside from the first opening lesson that we have from the Vayechi, the idea of living, we live in Egypt. The whole idea is to be accomplishing in Egypt. Again, we have to also look at the first letter, which is Vayechi, the Vav. Sorry, the first letter. First word. The idea is not just to take a lesson that you have to live in Egypt, but you have to be alive. Every time you do something, anything you do has to be with chayis. Don't be mechanical in anything that you do. The Rebbe says, what's the idea? A Jew may claim, what's the difference if I'm alive or not? The main thing is that I'm doing it. Hamaisa, the action is what counts. You want to know how I act, my behavior, in actual actions. I perform the mitzvahs. Look what I do. I wake up in the morning, I go to shul, I keep kosher, I light Shabbos candles, I put on film. I can check, I have a checklist. I'm doing what I should do. Why is it so important that I have to be alive when I do the Torah mitzvahs? I'm doing it with energy, with chayis, with vitality. What do you care if I put my vitality in other things? I'll do everything you want me to do, but but what really excites me is other things. I'm not excited about Torah mitzvahs. This is like football, right? I like football. That excites me. Yes, football was exciting in 1967 already. I like to read the newspapers. I feel in Yanim Sichlim Yaiser. I like to study other things. I take my vitality in my life when I study another study. Okay, I'll study Torah. Tell me how long I have to study Torah. I'll study Torah. Tell me what mitzvah to do. I'll do the mitzvah. When it comes to our mitzvahs, I'll do it. I'll do everything you want me to do. But where my life is, where I take chayas, that's another thing. So loy chayas, but not you can't have life in everything. So and not necessarily does the person put their vitality in the Torah mitzvahs. U'maisav litain, the person may continue to say, "Shagam oz harihu b'mam the matzav sheni roitzav and yechelis nifin melikuz." I'm not just a person that's doing it mamish out of hate. I don't want to, or I can't be disconnected from God. I want to be connected, but why do I have to put my chayis in my connection, my life, my vitality into the connection? Kipiskin Rabbeinu Zaken, like the Alter Rebbe says, and we have it in the Yom Yom. It's actually the Yom Yom of my birthday. Psakdin Haram, like the Ram says, what is the real internal want of every Jew? Is the kind of to do what Hashem wants. Okay, so I want to do what Hashem wants, but why do I have to put my chayis in that, my vitality in that? This is the parsha tells us. How does the parsha start? Yakov is alive. You must be alive with Torah mitzvahs. In Yiddish, it's called a koch. Koch means to cook with a bubble. Things are cooking within you about godliness. It's not enough to do mitzvahs. It's an expression. Mitzvahs anashim l'mada means people just get accustomed to it. Right? I've been waking up early in the morning for the past 30 years. I daven 3 times. I belong to the Jewish community because that's how I was raised. So a person becomes mechanical, even if you've made changes later in your life, but eventually that becomes a second nature. You have no energy for that. Aside for the fact that you're not going to have energy and chayis, vitality in your performance of the mitzvahs. Because of that, you're not going to perform the mitzvah properly. Could be you'll do it the opposite, right? You're trying to cut corners. Why? Because it doesn't excite you to do the mitzvah in the first place. A person must serve God, study the Torah, do the mitzvahs with chayis. That's where your energy should be focused. But the Rebbe says even more. When a person studies Torah with excitement, maybe when you study the Torah with excitement, and the study brings to action. When you're excited to study, that excitement adds to the action because the whole point of the studying is to go into action. Like it says in Tanya, that the chayis is not just a side thing. That the idea of chayis has to be from the beginning and the most fundamentals of our way of serving Hashem. In our accepting the yoke of God, even in our accepting the yoke, which seemingly is an idea of bittul, of self-nullification, of like an eved, of a servant, and an eved that says wants to be free. But no, even in being a kabbalas olnik, accepting the yoke should be with chayis, should be excited to accept the yoke. Like the Rebbe quotes the Alter Rebbe that to be alive in Torah is a foundation. When a person lives their life, he or she, with Vayechi, you're alive. Yakov was alive. Azai poilim, then you affect. Shagam beretz Mitzrayim, even if you're in Egypt, Ervas Haaretz, the lowest place in the world. Yeshne mifchash shnois chayav. What are your best years? Like the Balaturim says, Kafia Balaturim, it says Yakov lived 17 years. The number value of 7 is the same number value as Tov. Tov, right? Tesvav Beis is the number value of 17. Is Begematria Tov. The best years of Yaakov's life were in Mitzrayim. Loirak Beremetz doesn't just become a hint. And Torah Shebeksav, El Tov Begali becomes physically, you see how Mitzrayim is the best place for you because you're shining in that environment in a positive way with Torah mitzvahs. Torah Shebek explains it. The Rebbe says even more than that. Not only is it one time good, it's double good. Yud Zayin. The word Tov 17 is 17 is the number value of Tov. The number value of Vayechi is 28 is 34, and 34 is 2 times 17, which is 2 times Tov. That we know Tuesday. What's great about Tuesday? It has 2 times Kitov. Tov l'shamayim, tov l'bris. It's going to be good for you in heaven, good for you in earth. I mean, good for you in heaven things and good for you in earth things. This is a famous teaching of the Rebbe. That when we say Tuesday is 2 times Kitov, doesn't mean that things are good in my material life and things are good in my spiritual life. It's double Tov together, that your spiritual and your material all become one. So it's not such a way, that things are good for me in my brias, in my worldly things. It's different, what's good for me in my heavenly things, which is separate. It becomes one. It's not enough, the Rebbe says. How do you define that you become mamish a person of toiv, a person of good? It's not good that you have. It's not enough if you have a good nature. That tivay hatoiv, if you have a good nature, that's what you're doing a favor for someone else, because that's what, hey Danny, that's what you understand, and you're a good natured person. And hagas the toiv labrias, the reason why you're good with people, it's is because God told you to be because God told you to be good. Means you're not. It's not just a natural thing for you. Its foundation is from Torah, from Shemayim. Because if you're going to separate, when you're good with people, when there's things good within other people, is only going to be something separate. Only because your nature is to do acts of kindness. Sometimes you're going to reach the point where you're going to say, I don't want to be good anymore to people because it's taking away from my time, or it's taking away from what I could have, my money, right? I'm going to have to give up from things that are important to me. You'll stop doing good. Why? Because you're good to other people because you're a good-natured person, but your mind says, Atkan, up until a certain point. But when you're doing good with people, is because it's not because it's your nature, but because God said to do so. Sometimes you have to compromise on what's good for you in order to continue to being good for others. If the Torah tells you in that situation, in the event that the Torah does tell you in that situation, you have to do it anyways. So you're going to do it. That's true toiv labris. What do you mean toiv labris? Good amongst people, amongst worldly things. Toiv l'shemaim, toiv la'aretz. Toiv labris means also to be good with other people. Where does that really become something positive? When it's connected to toiv l'shemaim. That when Torah guides you how you're supposed to behave and interact with people, not only when things are working for you. We find this in the Talmud that says when it comes to giving charity. We find sometimes a person will give tzedakah. What's the difference how I give it? The bottom line is the receiving party, whether it's an institution or a person, is going to receive the funds. What's the difference how I do it? No, the Talmud says that's not enough. You have to be mefayis. You have to make the person feel good about it. Because it's not just enough that the bottom line, the person has the funds, or the institution has the funds, but you have to be mefayis. Make the person feel comfortable about receiving from you. The Gemara says, if you're not mefais, you don't satisfy. It means you talk nice words, make the person feel, shake the person's hand, a tap on the back. Obviously, everything within appropriate. The Gemara tells us, a person who kept the laws of respecting his father, the Gemara tells us in addition, there's a person that could feed their father the best foods, and you're gonna have the worst place in hell, so to say. And there's a person who could feed very minimal amount of food to his father or her father, and have the world to come. Why? Because how you make your father feel. If you're gonna serve your father steak and slam it on the table and be aggressive and not be kind, so then you lose everything. But if you have little to give, but you do it in a kind, loving way, it's not about so much what's being given, but how it's being given. Where does the person have the ability to behave properly? Even when you're giving is when you understand the Tov L'Shamayim, when things are good in heaven, means you understand this is what Hashem wants you to do. And like everything in Torah has to be with simcha and joy. You don't give it in a begrudging way. You give it with simcha, and then the person feels like a mensch, like a person received. You don't make the person feel bad about it. And the person behaves in such a way. Then you become a person that's going to be worthy of success in all things. To have absolute goodness, begashmi, is that God should provide you with everything you need in a material way, because your material is spiritual. That you continue to add and continue to give light. Let's go a little further. We may have to in the middle of this next one. So there now we went into Vayechi Yakov. Yakov lived 17 years in Mitzrayim. We explained that why is it 17 years? Why is it Tov? Why were his best years in Mitzrayim, like the Baal Turim says? Because even in Mitzrayim, the whole point is that even in Mitzrayim to be a Jew. And the second thing is you have to be alive. Do everything with chayas. Do chayas when you interact with people. Do chayas when you serve Hashem. It has to be, you're excited about it. And that comes from the ability to Vayechi 2 times 17 is 234, is the idea of Tov L'Brias, Tov L'Shamayim, to be able to, when you're acting good with people, interacting with the world, comes from a foundation of Torah. Now, what's the Vav? So the Rebbe continues, we just analyzed the first word, Yeshna Gam Psicha, Shel HaPsicha, the opening of the opening, the first letter. Shalateva Rishon is from the first word, Shal Shemar Nikra called Parsha, that the Parsha is not called Yechi, the Parsha is called Vayechi. And what's the Vayechi? And every time there's a Vav, the Vav is the Torah, in the Talmud, there's a Machlokas in the Reb Shimon and Reb Yehud, there's all arguments, do we darshan the Vav? Do we use the Vav as an insight? So the Gemara, so the Rebbe says, Ois Vav, Moir al Inyan HaSafa. The idea, like it says, Vayitain, Vayechi, is an addition, and you should live. It's not actually you lived, but you should live this. There's an addition to the life. As it says, Vav mois val inyan harishon. When there's a Vav in the beginning of a word, it's an addition to what we were talking about before. So you could say, the Rebbe says that the word Vayechi is not that he will live, but he did live. If that's the case, means if the Torah just wanted to tell us that he is opposed to he will live, that he is living, there's another way the Torah could have worded. Okay, let's skip the brackets, continue. What is the idea of the Vav in our service to God? Never get comfortable. There's no such thing as cruise control in life. You always have to be adding in holiness. And your person says, what do you mean I'm adding? I worked so hard to get to here. No, it's not enough. Ubagdama, the Rebbe explains. A person can claim and ask, why am I finding obstacles in my life? Things that are ikuvim, things that are holding me back. Concealments. My ability to do Torah mitzvahs. Whether I'm from within me, there's these obstacles. The foreign God within you that's not allowing you to commit to Torah mitzvahs. The world is creating obstacles for me to serve Hashem. I'm ready to do whatever Hashem wants. Why is it so difficult for me to serve God? Why am I going through so many challenges in order I want to do what Hashem wants, but within me I'm struggling, and outside of me it's difficult to be firm to do what the Torah wants. So what's the idea of the struggle? So the answer is the whole point of why soul comes down to this world is to uproot and to nullify, durchbrechen, to break through, the Rebbe says in Yiddish, es halamas vastarim, is to have these obstacles and to overcome them. And to refine your body and the animal soul, in your space of influence in this world. It means obviously each person is given a place that you could influence. Only specifically because you have obstacles. And through working on yourself, you overcome these obstacles. You transform the obstacles. Not only you push them aside, you transform them. That adds to holiness. This is the addition of the Vav, Vayechi. You're not just alive, you are continuing to be alive, adding and adding, and that's the power. The Vav is the turbo, the energy that allows for you to overcome obstacles as they come, to use the challenges as an opportunity to transform more and more. Our whole point of us being in this world is to add in holiness. The point of why a soul is here in this world. Not to survive. What does it mean, that you should come down and your soul shouldn't get damaged. Right? God gives you a soul. It's like a glass cup. Don't drop it. That's not the purpose of why we came down to this world, not to break the glass. And to stay as we were before, right? I survived. I passed go. Here's God. Here's your cup back. Here's your soul back. I didn't do any damage. Yes, that's a challenge itself, to leave this world as you came into this world. No one's making light of that. The Gemara tells us that you should try to leave the world as you entered the world, i.e., without sin, without blemishes, etc. Nevertheless, although it's something to be proud of and it's an accomplishment, that's not why you're here, to survive. We're not survivors. If you haven't added anything, it's like an investment. You come back and you invest $1 million and you get $1 million back. Wow, I didn't lose any money, but that's not why I didn't invest it in the first place. If you haven't accomplished and added anything, the soul hasn't been elevated, coming down to this world. What's the purpose of coming down to this world in the first place? Again, we should have been better off. We could have stayed above without the challenges and learned and done. And we are pure. We're the same completeness, anyways. We didn't come off better. We survived. So I'm a survivor. Survivor is an accomplishment, but that's not the purpose. The purpose of coming down to this world is in order you have an opportunity to be elevated in a way that the soul could never have been elevated had it remained in heaven. Before the soul came down. Why? When a person goes through service, you've added something. What have you added? You transformed the obstacles, the other side. And you added him. Imagine you come out, you didn't survive your animal soul. You made your animal soul into a holy soul and brought your animal soul into the camp of holiness. That's what it means to refine your body and your soul and your animal soul. Like the Torah says in the Vaishama, to love God with both your hearts. Your godly soul always loved God, always loves God. But now your animal soul loves God. Plural. Both sides of your Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara, even your evil inclination. Yisbara should be refined, should be transformed, and should become now not just you're schlepping, you're pulling the animal soul, but the animal soul becomes involved. And the animal, like the Rebbe always says, the animal soul is much more powerful than the godly soul. When it gets involved, the godly soul can kind of be passive, slow moving, go to the mikveh until davens. No. The animal soul doesn't have patience like the godly soul has. It wants to accomplish a lot once it transforms. Not just that you yourself become a better person. You don't get overwhelmed by the obstacles in the world. And on the contrary, you transform your space in this world. All right, we're going to stop here, guys. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining. Wish everyone a Tzom Kal, or meaningful fast, and Shabbat Shalom, and we'll see you all, B'ezras Hashem, next class.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Rabbi.